Welcome back. If there was ever a week that perfectly captured the extremes of our modern world, this is it. On one side of the Pacific, we are witnessing something breathtaking. Videos are circulating online of humanoid robots in China performing martial arts with perfect synchronization. These are fluid, coordinated movements that would be impressive for human dancers, let alone machines. The speed of this advancement is staggering, and while many channels have covered the technological marvel, I want to acknowledge it. This is not science fiction anymore. This is real, and it is moving faster than most predicted. But then we look at the other side of the world. And honestly, it is hard to know whether to laugh or cry. Because while China is perfecting the future, the United States is embroiled in what can only be described as one of the most ridiculous, crazy, and messy governance situations in modern history. The Supreme Court has just struck down President Trump's reciprocal tariffs as illegal. And I will be honest, as I have said before on this channel, I suspected this was coming. The legal foundation always seemed shaky. But here is where it gets truly insane. The ruling has opened a Pandora's box. We are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs that were illegally collected. And now, the question on everyone's mind, from Wall Street to the smallest importing business, is simple. Who is going to pay that money back? Let us start with what actually happened. On Friday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that President Trump exceeded his authority by using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law from 1977, to impose sweeping reciprocal tariffs on virtually all U.S. trading partners. This matters because previous presidents used that law for sanctions, for embargoes. But Trump was the first president to use it for import taxes. And the court said, essentially, that if Congress wanted to give the president the power to impose tariffs under this law, they would have said so explicitly. The ruling did not just affect one or two countries. This was about the global tariff regime Trump built last year, the reciprocal tariffs designed to counter what the administration called unfair trade practices. And here is the kicker. Two of the justices who ruled against him, Gorsuch and Barrett, were his own appointees. You can imagine that did not go down well. Trump's response was telling. He told reporters he was ashamed of certain members of the court. He called them a disgrace to our nation and disloyal to our Constitution. He even suggested, without evidence, that they may have been swayed by foreign interests. This is the former and potentially future president, accusing sitting Supreme Court justices of disloyalty because they ruled against his interpretation of a 1977 law. But the legal drama, as intense as it is not the real story. The real story is the money. Since these tariffs were implemented, the U.S. Treasury has collected over $133 billion, with estimates suggesting the total could exceed $175 billion. Some projections over a decade run into the trillions. And now, the Supreme Court has ruled those collections were illegal. But here is the catch. The court did not actually say how to give the money back. Justice Kavanaugh, in his dissent, warned that this would be a mess. During oral arguments, Justice Barrett reportedly used the exact same word. And they were being polite. The case now gets kicked down to the Court of International Trade. And this is where it becomes a logistical nightmare. More than 1,000 lawsuits have already been filed by importers demanding refunds. Under U.S. trade law, importers have 2 years to sue for their money back. But here is the problem. Each importer might have to sue individually. There is no guarantee of a class action. Small businesses that paid tens of thousands in illegal tariffs might have to spend thousands more in legal fees just to get their own money back. Some will simply give up. And even if they win, who gets the money? The importer of record, the entity that actually paid customs, might not be the company that ultimately bore the cost. That cost was passed down the supply chain to wholesalers, to retailers, and ultimately to you and me, the consumers. So if refunds go to importers, do they pass that money back down the chain? Do not hold your breath. Now, let us talk about the government's problem. Because this is where it goes from messy to potentially catastrophic. The U.S. government is already facing serious financial strain. We have seen repeated shutdown fights, most recently with the Department of Homeland Security funding lapsing, impacting FEMA, the TSA, and the Coast Guard. The national debt is sky high. And there are growing concerns about demand for longer-term Treasury bonds. UBS analysts project U.S. interest-bearing debt issuance could hit nearly $4.5 trillion in 2026. That is a lot of paper to sell. And now, the government may have to write checks for over $175 billion in refunds. Where does that money come from? Trump himself warned before the ruling that if the court ruled against him, it could cost the Treasury in excess of $3 trillion over time, calling it potentially non-sustainable. He was, in effect, admitting that his own tariff program, if struck down, could bankrupt the refund process. The administration's legal team has already acknowledged that if the tariffs were ruled unlawful, importers would likely be entitled to refunds. Customs and Border Protection is supposedly setting up systems to process them. But here is the thing. That money is already spent. It is in the treasury. It has been allocated in budgets, used to offset other spending, baked into economic projections. Taking it out now creates a hole that has to be filled. So, faced with this impossible situation, billions in refunds due, government funding in flux, debt mounting, what does the administration do? Pivot. Immediately. Within hours of the Supreme Court ruling, Trump announced a new plan. A 10% global baseline tariff, set to take effect in just 3 days. He is invoking Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which allows the president to impose up to 15% tariffs for 150 days. It is a temporary measure, but Trump suggested it could be followed by longer-term tariffs under Section 301 and Section 232, the same tools used on Chinese goods, steel, and aluminum. He is also talking about new tariffs on foreign cars, between 15 and 30%. And he is threatening Iran with military action if they do not agree to a nuclear deal within days, with reports suggesting a limited strike could be imminent. And then there is the rhetoric. Trump is still talking about taking over Greenland. There are reports of internal discussions about Canada's ability to defend its Arctic territory, with some Trump-aligned media framing this as a potential land grab. He is reportedly planning to visit China in April, despite no confirmation from Beijing that an invitation exists. None of this addresses the core problem. New tariffs mean new legal challenges, new refund claims, new uncertainty for businesses. The Supreme Court did not say Trump cannot impose tariffs. They said he cannot use that specific law to do it. So he is trying different laws. But the underlying economic disruption continues. For the rest of the world, this is whiplash. Exporters in every country that traded with the US under this regime are now facing uncertainty. Will they get refunds? Probably not directly. Those go to US importers. But if US importers get refunds, does that change pricing? Does it retroactively alter contracts? Trade relationships built over decades are now contingent on the outcome of thousands of individual lawsuits in a specialized New York court. And the geopolitical dimension cannot be ignored. The US is simultaneously threatening Iran with strikes, musing about taking Canadian territory, and imposing new global tariffs. Allies are bewildered. Adversaries are watching closely. Trump says foreign countries are dancing in the streets over the court ruling, but warns they will not be dancing for long. It is not exactly a message of stability. So where does this leave us? The immediate question, who pays the refunds? If it is the government, that means taxpayers. But those same taxpayers, as consumers, were the ones who ultimately paid higher prices because of these tariffs. So they would be paying twice. Once as consumers, once as taxpayers funding the refunds to corporations. That is not justice. That is a shell game. Could the government be bankrupted? That is probably overstating it. The US has borrowed trillions before. But a sudden, unplanned $175 billion liability, on top of existing debt pressures, at a time of political dysfunction, it is a stress test the system did not ask for. And what about Trump? He seems utterly unconcerned. He is relaxed, talking about new tariffs, new wars, new territorial ambitions. It is as if the logistical nightmare of unwinding his own policy is someone else's problem. And technically it is. It is the Court of International Trade's problem now. But the political and economic consequences will land on all of us. I started this video talking about humanoid robots in China. And maybe that is the right lens to view all this through. While one part of the world is building the future with precision and speed, another part is tying itself in knots over who pays for yesterday's mistakes. I honestly do not know how this gets sorted out. Maybe the administration finds a way to delay refunds indefinitely. Maybe Congress steps in, though that seems unlikely. Maybe the courts structure a repayment plan that stretches over years. Or maybe this drags on so long that the problem outlasts the administration that created it. What I do know is this. Something this crazy, this messy, does not just happen to a country. It is chosen. It is the result of decisions, of legal theories, of political incentives. And right now, the bill for those choices is coming due. I want to hear from you. How do you think this gets resolved? Will the government actually pay back the tariffs? Will new tariffs survive legal challenge? And what happens to the global trading system while we figure it out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this video gave you something to think about, Hit like, share it with someone trying to make sense of this mess, and subscribe for more analysis. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.